This is Optometrists Building Empires, and I'm your host, Ankit Patel. Each week, we'll explore the journey of multi-practice ownership and leadership in optometry. Join us for insights and strategies from the top minds in our field. This show is sponsored by My Business Care Team. My Business Care Team helps your office increase revenues, reduce costs, and reduce staffing headaches. Let's build your empire together. Today's guest is someone I'm looking forward to. He's got a unique position in how he positions his optometry practices, and I'm excited to speak with him today. He specializes in anterior segment disease, as well as things like keratoconus, corneal degenerations, and dystrophies, ocular surface disease, especially contacts and myopia management. He's featured as a U.S. Newsweek top eye doctor. He's a fellow at AAOMC, um, and he's Texas leader of the Young ODs of America. He's optometrist and co-owner of Evolutionary Eye Care, and he is Dr. Anith Pillai. Anith, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to do this. Very, very humbling, very honored. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm excited for this conversation. Let's jump into our first question that we like to ask everyone is, what's the most important thing that helped you grow your empire?
Wow, that's humbling to hear the word empire. So I appreciate that. I will say if I can be allowed to, maybe I'll hit 2 points, but I think one is delegation was so important. I think as private practice owners coming in and just as doctors, we like to be kind of control freaks and allowing our team members, associate doctors or staff to take on responsibilities that can really help you grow and take you to the next level and letting go of that leash so that they can thrive as well and help you expand. That has been a major issue that's helped us kind of grow and expand. So delegation certainly is one. And the other one is going to be just really focusing on taking calculated risks. And I take that very seriously, calculated risks.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about, what do you mean calculated risk? Are we talking like really complex, like calculus type math, or like, tell me a little bit more. What does that mean to you, calculated risk?
Yeah, almost to a degree, right? So this is tough because I'm a big poker player. So sometimes I go a little wild on the poker table. So I wouldn't go that route. I wouldn't go like how you go in Vegas and play blackjack. But what I mean by calculated risk is taking a risk to improve your business, but looking at metrics. So those are very different things, I think. A lot of people will think, well, I need to expand, I need to grow. There's an opportunity. Let me just go for it. Why are you going for it? What's your plan for it to succeed? I think those two things are important before you take that leap. Others will say, well, it's not worth the risk right now. And they'll stay kind of pat and not move forward. Well, when you do that, there's only so much you can grow, right? If you're just not taking any other expansion opportunities or you're not taking any other business opportunities. So what I mean by that is when an opportunity comes up, first thing, I always never say no. I'll always take a look at it. And probably 80 to 90% of things that come across my desk, I probably do say no to. But the reason I say no is not because, oh, I'm not ready, or no, it's too expensive, or no, I don't know if it's going to work. I try to take the unknown out of it. I need to know the numbers and then a game plan to try to make it succeed. And when I come up with that business plan or that metric calculation, there's got to be some variables of potential failure. So I like to have, and I'm a little aggressive, but I think anywhere between if you get 70 to 30% of metrics down where you can predictably say that, hey, this could work, I think that's a good opportunity. Now, when that metric comes down to of the variability portion of I don't know what's going to happen to 50% or below, that's usually one that I'll probably pass on because that's too much risk for me. And that's what I mean by the calculated risk of how I go about it, of looking at, okay, what's the numbers at now? What is the potential opportunity? What else can I bring on that has been successful for me in the past? And how can I incorporate that in this new opportunity?
Now that's everything, right? That's like, do I buy a new piece of equipment? Do I buy a new business? Do I do a cold start? I'm guessing you kind of apply that calculus to almost any business decision. Is that right?
I do. So, we have three practices now, and our first one was a cold start, and the other two were practice purchases. I will say some of them were kind of mid cold starts because they were practices that weren't doing exactly what we did or not at the level that we wanted to be. So we did have to grow it substantially. But the metrics and the calculated risk, yes, I definitely incorporated for the last two. The first one is a cold start. When I started, no, I was just a naive young guy that didn't know what he was doing and thought, hey, this sounds like a good idea. Let's go into it.
Yeah, famous last words, right? It's like, yeah,
Exactly.
sure, let's do this. Why? Hey, watch this. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool. So, tell me a little about delegation. Talk to me more about what that actually means. I think it's conceptually it's easy to kind of understand, but I find it's really hard from execution standpoint.
So what I found, so there's two things to that, right? There's the finally giving up the reins and then the execution portion. So I'll say the giving up the reins is definitely the first part and sometimes the hardest part. So what I found in my first, I don't know, call it 4 or 5 years of practice when we're at a single location, I did a lot of administrative work, which I thought was so important that nobody else could do. I mean, to the point of posting insurance payments, looking through all the EOBs, catching what was missed. And that paperwork, as I call it, really didn't allow me to think of ideas to help grow and expand because I was just stuck at my computer desk the whole day. I was going through clinic and then I would be stuck with a pile of paperwork. And then by the end of the day, now it's 9 p.m. and I got nothing else to do. So it kept me sustained, but it didn't allow me to think of creative ideas to continue to grow. So that was a aha moment where I realized I can keep doing this, but I'm going to stay in the same boat. I got to take this off my plate. And then giving that up was tough. And that went through a series of team members that are in the office to team members that are out of the office, virtual assistants, which we can get into, which I'm a big proponent of. When I was finally ready to give it up, the execution part is it's not going to happen overnight. Great. I'd love to tell everybody here, it's like, I gave up my delegation. I have team members that do all this. And like overnight, it just grew like crazy. It's not how it works. It's not real life. So I knew there was going to be a time commitment to that. Okay. And for the task that I'm talking about, that seemed to be very time consuming for an owner that I don't think should be on their plate. I would say plan for about 3 months. And that seems like a lot. 3 months of dedicated training to an individual member or two to do the task that you're already doing, that you're doing to perfection, right? That you want to give 3 months of time for somebody else to do it, not as good as you. My view on that was this is 3 months for the next 10 years of my life, for the next 15, for the next 20, because they're going to be able to grow and expand it. And I can do the things that are important as a business owner. And that 3 months is tough to get into for sure.
Yeah, and that's interesting because you have a really long term view on how you're viewing your team there. You said I believe you said something 3 months for the next 10 years. So you're assuming that person is going to be with you a long time. How does that? How do you keep them there so long? How do you keep folks engaged?
That's a good question. So, as we all know, staffing is a really big problem for private practice owners. And maybe they won't all be there, right? But I can at least implement a system where even if they leave, I can delegate that to somebody else. So you can train one person to train another. And this is a great example. So we had an office manager that was fantastic. And we had the vision that they were going to elevate to being an overall manager of all the practices. Well, they had other career goals that they wanted to go on to. And that was a hard hit for us. We're like, we were prepping you to be the manager of three different locations instead of one location and giving you all the education, all the investment of our time to get into them. Now, no hard feelings. She had a great opportunity. I want them to grow and thrive in things they want to do. But what we're able to do is she had a skill set and knowledge to train a replacement. Now, that was a quick decision. We had to find somebody that can not go entirely into a role, but baby steps into a role. And one thing that really helps with training that I started maybe about 2 years ago, because you keep repeating these things over and over. Whether you're training your staff, other staff are training, start doing video trainings that are recorded using software like Loom, for example, where you can record how things are doing. So now it's automated. So when a new staff member comes in, they can learn the essentials of workup, the essentials of your EHR, et cetera. And then even for manager positions, recording that. Again, yes, it's an investment of time. And that's where I talk about those 3 months for the next 10 years, because then each new member comes in. And then when you have a manager that does leave, great. The next person can be trained and moving on up. So you always want to invest in your staff, because maybe that person that you thought was going to elevate has to leave for whatever reason. Life happens, family stuff happens, career opportunities happen. Have someone in the weeds that you're grooming that has a potential to get into that role, but also a desire because you know you're investing in them.
Yeah. And so it's almost like you have a pipeline of folks. And it's
Yeah,
interesting. Well, and now with AI, it's cool because you can take the video, turn it into a transcript, and say, "Hey, spit out an SOP for me." And
exactly.
it's a good starting point. You still have to tweak it, but it saves a lot of time in doing that. It's just really cool.
Absolutely. I think the video training has been a big hit for our team, but also I think a time saver for sure.
That's awesome. What's something you ran into when you were building your empire that you didn't expect? That you were like, this is a bit different than I thought it was going to be, or tougher, or easier even.
Uh, my communication with team members as a leader, that was a tough one. I think when you grow up, going into medicine, being a doctor, your parents want you to be one. I have an older sibling who was a physician, and you're just groomed to be hard hitting, right? Like nothing's positive feedback. It's all, you didn't do this well, you didn't do this well, you didn't do this well. And then even being in optometry school, right? If you remember what it was like being with attendings, right? It's always so nervous, I'm going to get grilled. And it's just the nature we grew up in. It's what made us thrive for sure. But that's not the nature of everyday work life for everybody else. Not understanding that my team members are not physicians, right? They want a work life balance. They want to have a happy work environment. They may not have this as their, to your point, a 10-year, 20-year-old goal. They want to have a work environment that's fun and enjoyable. And when I first came in, I treated it like I was an attending and my staff were people that were the students. So everything was, this is where you messed up. This is where you messed up. This is where you messed up. And in my mind, I'm doing them a favor. I'm like, I'm trying to educate them, trying to learn. But where it really clicked for me, one time my wife came home from work. She doesn't work in healthcare. And she was talking about one of her managers and how everything that he says is always negative. Like they never got any positive reinforcement. So they would do something good, but it was how like, yeah, that's fine. But you still messed up on this. Yeah, you still messed up on that. This still wasn't right. And she was telling me about it. And I was like, wow, that kind of sounds like me. And I really need to change my mindset of how I need to interact with my team members. So having a positive reinforcement to lead properly and giving them the feedback in a positive way so they can grow and learn, and not having to go home thinking that, man, I just sucked today. Dr. P thought I did terrible, which is far from the truth. Their perception of how I communicated with them was all negative. But in reality, 80 to 90% of what they did was positive. But I was only highlighting the 10% that wasn't up to 100% perfect standard because I wanted to achieve that perfection. But I needed to realize it's so important, maybe the most important, to highlight their wins and not so much highlight their losses and deficiencies. And that took
Yeah.
time. That was tough. I'm blessed to have a great business partner who probably learned that lesson right off the bat, and I had to kind of learn from him and from from that experience that I mentioned from my wife's manager as well.
With the with that mental mind shift, what are some things you did to help shift your mindset? I imagine a lot of people listening might be curious. I know I am. So curious to see how you.
So, it's something as simple as going in and smiling all the time. I already did that with patient experience. I was fairly good at I prepped myself. Even if a team interaction was negative, hey, you didn't do this workup properly, whatever. Right before I walk through the door, deep breath, put on the smile. It's showtime. I got to go. Right. And because I want to give my patients the best experience possible, they're coming to see us and they could see anybody else. I want to make sure that I give it my all, personality wise, energy wise, and clinically wise. And I thought, I'm not giving that same energy to my team members. So something as simple as shifting the focus of how I enter patient care, I should be focusing on my team members' care. And it doesn't happen overnight, right? I mean, it's a slow progress over years, but you get to realize it step by step, and investing in the time to put that effort in, to let them know that they are worth that effort. And they're not going to notice it after a week. But, new team members come in and then you start to hear more and more feedback and the communication with them of letting them know, I want to know what you feel that we as owners can do better for you. One thing that was great to hear that also was changing my mindset. There was a team meeting that we did once where I just had an anonymous survey. And we do this regularly now, but the first time I did it, maybe 5-6 years ago, I had asked all our team members to do a survey to rate the owners, us, and don't put a name to it, but tell us what we're good at, what we suck at, what we can improve upon. And I mean, the majority of it was basically highlight our pros as much as our cons.
Interesting. That's so what do those survey results say now? Curious. Like,
yeah, so we did that one not too long ago. I think about 1 month ago at our quarterly meeting, and a lot of it's so funny. We get less and less negative responses, which I'm always kind of scared to hear. I was like, are you not telling me something? You can't be perfect. We're never going to reach perfection, but the amount of feedback that we say of how much we support them has been great. So I'm sure there's still things we need to improve upon, but the positive reinforcement has definitely gone up, and it's usually little things of like how we can improve.
Okay, that's really neat. I like your adage of, if you're smiling with patients, you should be smiling with your staff too.
Yeah.
Right? Why are they getting a different version of you? Right. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, they were getting the opposite.
I think my wife's actually a doctor, and she has similar stories with the attending, like you had mentioned.
Right.
I didn't go through. I went to engineering school, but I have similar stories with professors too. So I feel your pain. Maybe not as severe as what you had it through, but wife. One of our values for our company for classic vision care is always on stage, and that's because it's like, hey, you know what? Patients see us once a year. Our staff is here today. Let's make the best we can. And over the years, little things like, hey, you know what? If someone comes in and says something, try to say they're a bad person, but maybe they're just having a tough day, right? Things like that. And we found that helps a lot too. Just move.
I love the always on stage. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, the full value is care. So the A stands for always on stage, which is kind of fun.
Yeah.
The other thing I was reading, I actually do my master's program, that they did a study on teams, and they found they had like 60 teams. It was a giant company, and it was a sales teams. They broke them down into high performing, medium performing, and low performing teams, and they basically transcribed every interaction that the teams had for 6 months. And they found that there was one factor that determined how successful a team would be. And it was the ratio of positive comments to negative comments. And I'll let you kind of guess where the poor performers were, where the medium performers were, and the high performers. If you had to guess, where do you think how many positive comments to negative comments do you think the poor performers had?
I would say, so if I could just go in order, high to low,
Sure.
the high performers, I would say probably 80 to 90 to 10 to 20, right? Positive to negative. The medium was probably 60-40. And I would say the poor performers is probably the opposite of the 80-20 rule, right? The 20 to 80, 20% is the positive.
Yeah, it's actually pretty close. They found that a minimum of 3 positive to 1 negative for the high performing teams.
Yeah.
With the average being about 6-1. Medium performers were about 2-1.
Yep.
Positive to negative. And then the low performers were actually 1-3. So 1 positive, 3 negative. So it's kind of interesting that you mentioned that language is really important. So it's kind of a cool way you kind of came around that similar conclusion.
Yeah. I mean, we all know, communication, when you have a team environment, communication is the number one key. Whether you believe that you're doing something that's helpful, it all matters on how that other person's perceiving it and how they take it in, to help either grow or to shrink and, have a negative response.
Yeah. So let's tie that in a little bit. Right now, a lot of folks are having challenges with staff, finding staff, keeping staff. How are you dealing with that? We talked about a little bit with keeping your staff, right? It's pretty incredible that you're doing that. Talk to us about anything you can share with us in terms of longevity, trade secrets. What is it that makes your practice special with staff management? If you have a special technique.
Absolutely. We succumb to it like everybody else. Don't get me wrong. Our staff, not that they're perfect. I'm just saying our situation isn't perfect. I think a lot of our team members do try very hard and do their best. I'm just saying our situation is maybe not so different for everybody else. But I think one thing that we've tried to help is the motivation, getting constant feedback. Weekly meetings that our team managers do, monthly meetings with the entire staff, owners, doctors, the entire staff, quarterly meeting with everybody getting together offsite. So that constant communication feedback. I want to hear the reasons we're doing well. I want to hear the reasons we're not doing well. I want to praise you on the things you're not on the things you're doing well. I want to talk about the things that we can improve and your feedback of what we can do to improve. So that communication really helps to get a tie-in to the company culture. I think that's so important in culture. We talk about that in sports, right? That culture is so important. Like, why do some teams that have a lot of talent don't do well, and then teams that seem bereft of talent constantly do well? This last weekend, if you're a football fan, Jets lost to the Steelers, right? And they both had similar situations. Jets have a lot of talent. The Steelers came in not so much, but there's a culture there, right? So I think in really putting that into place helps keep longevity for staff. All right. Now, the other thing, I'm also very lucky. I have a business partner. And about 2 years ago or so, I told him he can take over the staff hiring portion. Because what we would do is we have a bunch of leads coming in, whether it's Indeed, Craigslist, Facebook, other referrals, whatever. Hundreds coming in every week for every post, right? And like 2% of them are good. People would show up to interviews, etc. So what would happen is he would interview who knows how many, and then he would filter down the good ones to me for a second interview. And from then we would kind of decide. And he would get so mad because he'd give me like 3 interviews one week, and I'd say, "Yeah, I really didn't like any of them." Oh my gosh, he was so frustrated with me because he would be like, "I went through 200 people for those three, and you brushed them off." And so I felt bad for him. So I eventually said, "Listen, if you feel a connection, if you feel like they're worth taking risks, why are we going through this process? Right? You take it, hire them. Let's go." Every one of our hires is a kind of a 3-month tryout period,
Mhm.
right? And if it works, fantastic. We found a superstar. And if it doesn't, we're in the same position. So I think that helped the process of having two owners of dealing with that process where it really didn't need to be. One person could handle the hiring process. And then we could see from the rest of our team how they interact and how the owners interact, how our associate doctors interact, if they're going to be a good fit. And since doing that, he's made really good decisions. Yeah, we lost a few, but I mean, the ones we got are really superstars because that culture was emphasized during the interview process.
Yeah, it almost sounds like even in that, you're delegating out parts of there too, right? You're like giving up control. It's almost like you're helping empower the folks in your company to really take charge and make
Yeah, I
decisions.
mean, because I realized when I was getting his feedback, and I was like, well, okay, you went through all the applications, you had multiple conversations. I'm having a 10-minute conversation and making a decision. And I think you have more insight into it. So you should make that decision. And if you've been doing it for this long, like 2 years of doing it, and you think that they're worth it, let's go with it. We can always
Almost
fall
change it.
back. Hey, this just
Yeah,
isn't a good fit, right? We have 90 days to make that decision. So,
makes sense. Um, Talk a little bit about you touched on a little bit with the virtual assistants. How do they incorporate with your team?
oh, I cannot emphasize enough of how much of a game changer that is. So, um, a few years ago, I started with the virtual assistant to take some of my administrative duties off my plate. When I talk about, insurance posting, going through EOPs, then, my managers are doing that. I was like, well, you know what? They should probably be doing more high level stuff. This is just entry work. So I did again the training session, 3 months. It took a while that you had to learn how. So I had to sit there and walk her through it. But it elevated to that she kind of runs my life now. I mean, when we even set up this podcast, I think you probably saw it, right? Like it went through her. She picked the time, the date. She goes through my scheduling of conferences. She is scribing with me. So I have an iPad with me. So I'm walking into every room. She's with me. I'm dictating. Uh, what I'm seeing at the sit lamp, what I'm seeing at posterior seg. So I have a lot more patient facing encounters. It's not me sitting at my computer. I rarely do that unless I'm an idiot one day and don't charge my iPad. But it's made the patient experience so much better. And they're actually fairly impressed that I would have technology like that. So she's able to even dictate and scribe for my specialty services. So one thing that was tough, if you're going into like scleral lenses and ortho-K, there's a time component of designing these lenses, right? But when you're at a certain level, you kind of know exactly what you're going to do. And what would happen is I have a scleral lens patient, for example. I see what the fit looks like. I put my notes in. So now I call or email. I put that in. I have to create a status in my EMR. I have to finish the charting. I mean, that alone can waste 10, 15 minutes, especially if you're slow at the computer like I am, right? Now my day goes in. I come in. I see the patient and I say, oh, this is 400 microns of clearance. There's edge lift here. I want to steepen this. I want to reduce this clearance by this. She types in the notes and then, hey, call whatever lab, order it, put in the status. I'm just talking. That took 10 seconds instead of 10 to 15 minutes for each single one. So she's gotten proficient at pretty much every area of practice. So much so that I hired a second one to kind of help her with all the workload that she can train her. She also does watching our metrics. So she'll know, hey, this is the production that all the doctors are doing. This is what our capture rate at each location. So we have spreadsheets that go on that I can calculate how well we're doing and how we're growing or not growing. And that has been such a time saver because I'm not inputting that into a spreadsheet anymore. I'm not calculating that. I know there's software out there that can do it, and they're all going to be inaccurate. But when you have a staff member, a virtual assistant that's doing that plus everything else, it's been amazing. The second way I utilized it is with answering phone calls. This was something that was personal for me. I always hated my team members answering phone calls when they could be helping patients. Like I hate the concept of a front desk. Patients coming in, receptionist is on the phone. They can't help. You got to go wait. No, I want us to be all in for the patients that are there. So I delegated all phone calls out to virtual assistants. And that took time because they got to learn the lingo. They got to learn how to schedule specialty type of appointments. They have to learn all those questions. So we had to have staff train them all, right? And that's, again, that 3-month investment to hopefully save the next 10 years for a better patient experience where they're not bogged down on the phone call. Now to the point where they can even do prior authorizations, they can set up referrals. We're a big referral-based clinic, so they're seeing referrals come in. One person's in charge of scheduling. We send referrals out for, say, cataract surgery, corneal cross-linking. Another person's in charge of that. So all the things that are not patient-centric, I want it to be not in the office. I want it to be delegated out.
Yeah, it's funny. We have a similar model for us as well. So
Yeah.
We found it's a little bit easier. It's a little quicker than 3 months if you have certain things in place. But it can definitely be. You got to know how to manage remote staff for sure. That can be a challenge, but that's really cool. Yeah.
I will say after the first hires, it gets quicker. So we hired 2 initially for the phone calls. It was completely new. Our in-office staff, wasn't sure exactly how to do the training and everything else. That was a 3-month process. When we hired a third, she was done in 4 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah. We typically see about 2 to 4 weeks is the ramp time or faster. So
Just like with anything else, once you've done it a few times, you have the process in place.
That's awesome. So let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk about future. If you were to scale business, double it in size, let's say if you wanted to do that, how would you approach it? How would you think about approaching it? Kind of just want to see your thought process on how you would.
That's a great question. Doubling, that's a big number, right? Yeah. So I think that calculated risk has to come into play. I think you have to look at newer opportunities. So I think a big part of any business that you see that's long-standing and continuously growing, they're adaptable. Our eye care industry is no different. There's things that are happening in our industry that we probably can't operate the same way we did 10 years ago, 20 years, maybe even 5 years ago. So technology isn't going away. These big corporations are coming in and being big players. They're not going away, regardless of, and I'm a big proponent of supporting, our optometric associations and state societies, et cetera. You're not getting rid of big corporations. If things are making it easier for consumers. And that's why I say consumers and not patients. To us, we may think it's detrimental to patient care, but at the end, they are still consumers and they're going to do things that are easy. And if it's available, they're going to lead that way. We have to think about ways to incorporate that technology to make us better, i.e., not be blockbuster, right? When Netflix comes around. And then also to pivot into other specialties. So looking forward to what are other areas of growth where those corporations are not influencing and you are the major player, and really focusing on that. And, one book that I really love and always recommend, Pumpkin
Yeah.
Plan. It's fantastic. Really focusing on a niche practice, just niche specialties, and doing everything you can to go all in on that. Because I think, the more you dabble, the less successful you're going to be in a certain area. So give it you all into a specialty.
Reminds me of a Karate Kid quote back in the day, the original Karate Kid movie, where I think Mr. Miyagi said, I'm going to butcher this, but something to the effect of, don't be a grape in the middle of the road. Grapes on one side, it's fine. So on the other side, it's fine. It's the middle road, gets squished. So it's like, hey, if you're trying to do everything, trying to spread yourself thin in the middle of the road, you're going to get squished like the grape. You got to pick a
Right,
side.
right.
Yeah, that's it. It's good. It's good insight. Um, let's shift gears a little bit. I want to learn a little bit more about you and what makes you tick. Um, I like this question a lot. I'd like to know maybe 3 or 4 moments in your life that you felt were really formative. It could be like, when you're a kid in kindergarten, or it could be college class or whatever, anything in between. Could have been something you did last week, but maybe a couple of moments in your life that you felt like, yeah, that moment was really formative, and why?
So from early on in life, my older brother was a big influence, and he was such a hard worker. And I think his influence on me helped with that. Saying that, you know, don't do what's required of you. Do the amount you think you need to do to be where you want to be. Right. So a good example of that, he's 10 years older than me. So he really pushed me. So just in academics, if I was in eighth grade in summertime, he's not getting me ready for eighth grade. He's getting me ready for 12th grade. I'm studying calculus at that age, right? And I wasn't doing well at it, but he wanted me above the curve. He's like, go above and beyond so that you can get to that level that you want. He even mentioned where we go into classes, study the material so well so you can ask the questions to the teachers. Yeah, that you already prepared to know the answers, but you're asking you because you can show your preparation. So that was good in terms of work ethic, I think. That dipped off a little bit in college. I went to UT, so it was kind of a party school. But
UT Texas, right? Austin.
But I think that helped in a work ethic and just an academic mindset. The next thing that helped was realizing that gets you to a certain point of grades, getting into schools. But true success is all about people interaction. I learned that, I think, when we opened our practice and dealing with all the things you have to deal with, negotiating contracts, dealing with landlords, dealing with equipment. And as you can probably attest, and I didn't know this at the time, but everything's negotiable, right? Like, you never hurts to ask, because at the worst case, you're right where you started. But so many of those interactions that were positive were based on networking. And that took me to another level. That's why I get to do a lot of speaking engagements. That's why I get to do being on a platform like this. I think networking is so important. That people connection is paramount into getting to places that you want. Because at the end of the day, if I told you, hey, I'm a 4.0 GPA and I have, this degree, you don't care. We know each other through a connection, and that's what helps. You still have to have the background, the pedigree, but the networking is so important. And I don't mean that in a way to say, more qualified people are put behind me or to others. I'm just saying that you have to have that people connection, because that's what's really going to propel in not only in business, but even in patient care. I mean, you could be the best diagnostician, but if you're not having that connection with that patient, they're just not going to trust you. They're not going to believe in you. The best doctors are rated because of how they interact with their patients. And that's true in business and every other walk of life.
I think I read somewhere that the clinically, it didn't, like, you could be a really good doctor, but if you didn't have good bedside manners, you were more likely to get sued than someone who made more mistakes than you.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. There's some studies on it. Yeah. The numbers are astounding. I mean, Dr. House is a good one, right?
Yes.
I mean, or bedside man. I'm sure he got sued a lot. Like,
I'm sure. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And then the last one was it was actually something that I got from somebody I did trust, but who was in academia a lot, and they mentioned, hey, when you go into clinic care, this is right when I was about to start my business. They mentioned, don't chase the money. If just do right, the money will come. Um, and replace money with success, with whatever success you think it is. I thought, now looking back, that was horrible advice. I think just doing things and hoping it'll turn out the way you want is is horrible advice. You have to go after it. You have to be proactive in reaching out, right? So if your terms of success is financial, then you have to go out and think, what are the marketing strategies I can do? What are the things that I can do to differentiate myself? If your things are of defining success is I need to be with my family more, you need to be more proactive in setting aside time from your schedule to make sure I'm with my family for this many hours. I'm not missing this. It doesn't just happen. If you just sit back and hope for the best is never going to get to you. You have to be proactive in dictating the outcomes of your life.
Those are good insights. So, tell us a little bit about you. Like, what do you do for fun? I see the Houston Rocket sign in the back. I'm guessing you're a big Houston sports fan. Being a
Absolutely.
Titans fan, I said I won't hold it against you. Being a Texans fan, it's okay.
I
Uh,
appreciate it. I appreciate it.
yeah, tell us a little bit more. What do you like to do for fun? What do you
Yeah.
do professionally? Like, yeah, share us a little more.
It's funny. You get less and more time to do that kind of stuff when you're working, right? But
Yeah.
it's funny that I had that question come to me before about work-life balance. Like that was such a big thing for so many years. And I kind of didn't understand that concept as much because I was like, well, okay, my work is my life. I don't need a balance. I love my work. And that's maybe not everybody. And if you go into a position where your work just feels like work, that sucks. That's a tough way to live. So to have a career that's truly a passion, it's why I'm smiling right now. It's why I don't mind not being able to catch every single Rockets game anymore. Right? I'll have to miss a couple here or there because the other thing I'm doing is not taking joy away. So that helps. Having a career that's a passion of yours is big, and I would consider that my hobby too, including doing things like this that just help the profession and talking about business or our profession. But yes, I am a sports fan. Born and raised in Houston, so Rockets, Texans, Astros. Sad to see the Astros go out this playoffs, but we had a really good run. To all your Dodgers fans or anybody else listening that are Astros haters, we came back and won a second one, so we did it. We did it either way. Uh,
You're not bitter about that at all, are
yeah,
you?
I'm a big UT Texas Longhorn fan, so I went to undergrad. I went to U of H optometry school, but I'm still a Longhorn at heart. Tough weekend with the Georgia loss, but I still am very hopeful. So sports is probably the biggest thing that occupies my life outside of obviously my family. I have a lovely, beautiful wife and a 2-year-old daughter that keeps me really busy. So it's a real fun time at home too.
Nice. So, thanks again for sharing. Where can people find you if they want to connect with you?
Great, thank you. In this day and age, most people now reach me via social media. So, if it's Facebook, it's just my name, Anith Pillai. At Instagram, it's at AnithP23. In both platforms, I really just post a lot of optometry content. So it's a lot of clinical cases. It's a lot of keratoconus, ortho-K, dry eye. So that's how most people reach out to me now. I also post a lot on LinkedIn. So, and that's again, just my name. And if you, any optometrists that are just asking questions or want to learn more, feel free to email me as well. Maybe you can drop it in the message. It's just Dr. Pillai at evolutionaryeeyecare.com. And on our website, evolutionaryeeyecare.com, you can find out everything about myself and our practice. And there's contact information on there too. So again, I'd be happy for anybody that's listening to reach out, whether it's a general question or even if it's a comment about how you hate the Longhorns or the Rockets.
That'll be a fun conversation. Well, thank you again, Dr. Pillai, for joining us.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me. It was a great time. And thank you to the audience for listening.
Yeah, and audience, thank you again for listening. If you learned something or like something, please like and share the podcast with someone you know. Thanks again, Anith. And this has been another exciting episode of Optometrists Building Empires. We'll see you next time. That's a wrap on another episode of Optometrists Building Empires. Thanks for joining. For show notes and more, visit buildingempires.live. This show is proudly sponsored by My Business Care Team. My Business Care Team was born out of staffing challenges my wife and I faced together, managing multiple optometry locations. We refined our approach at Classic Vision Care and now offer our expertise to others. If you're experiencing challenges with staffing and you'd like to set up a discovery call, we'd be happy to help you and connect you with the right resources. We'll see you next time.